Kia ora, and good afternoon. I'm part of an amazing and interdisciplinary team of researchers, and for the past 10 years, we've been looking at the future of farms and rural communities. And just yesterday, we released a short book. In the book, we talk about the research that we've been doing and what we've learned about community resilience. We also talk about the changes that these communities are facing, the environmental, the economic, technological, and policy-related changes. But most importantly, we wrote this book for a technical and a non-specialist audience. We've written over 100 journal articles and conference papers, and we've spent a lot of time talking to ourselves, but this is our chance to try to talk to everyone else. One of the key concepts in our work is resilience. We're often asked to define resilience, and what we say it's the ability to cope with change. And there are two components to that. One component is bounce back, and this is the ability to deal with the shock and return to where you were before. And this concept is often used in engineering or ecology. The second component in resilience is bounce forward. So this is the ability to adapt to change. It recognizes that the world's always changing around us, and it asks the question, well, how do we deal with that? How do we make the best of it? So resilience, importantly, has these two aspects to it. Bounce back, which is about identity and retaining some sense of who you are, and bouncing forward, moving with change. So that's a key concept in the book. And about 2 years ago, when we started our book project, we pulled together all this work we'd done, and we looked for common threads. And we decided on 4 themes, and you've got them here. First, people have options. It's important to recognize when you're working with rural communities that people generally aren't stuck in one land use, one activity. They actually have options. The second thing is that people in communities are helping themselves. They're creating their own futures. They are active agents in their lives. The next 2 themes are about resilience itself. First of all, resilience is complex, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. And then secondly, resilience has lots of scales to it. We say it's local and larger. So I can walk through all the theory and the themes for you, but what I want to do now is make it real with a concrete example. I want to talk to you about Wairoa and Ngāti Pahuera. And this is a picture from some of our work in Wairoa. And I think this captures these 4 themes. What you have here is a group of men who are laying down a hangi for an event that they've put on for rangatahi. And what you see here is a group of people who've come together to help each other out, to work towards a common purpose. At the same time, they're living in and supporting their own culture and helping to pass it on to the next generation. So you get that complexity, you get those different scales acting, you get people creating their own futures. But when we talk about resilience, we don't just use photos like this and stories about communities. We also use statistics. Now, I hear a bit of a groan, but actually when we go out into communities, we find it really useful to talk about statistics because we can use them to challenge people's preconceptions. And I want to give you an example of that. Here are 3 statistics with the data for New Zealand and for Wairoa. Now, if you know anything about Wairoa, you probably have a bit of a negative perception. You're probably thinking, oh, a bit deprived, it's got a bit of trouble there. And I won't deny that there are problems. And the first statistic there reflects that. What you see there is that Wairoa's unemployment rate is basically twice the national average. And so absolutely, there aren't as many jobs there, and there are more unemployed there. But then the second statistic is about election turnout. And voting participation is a metric that's used around the world as an indication for how much people are connected with their communities and with their government. In New Zealand, in 2013, in the local election, the turnout rate was 48%. But Wairoa had the second highest of any place in New Zealand at 62%. So with that new bit of information, that new statistic, do you find your perception of Wairoa changing at all? The third statistic there is about volunteering. So we did a project on the informal economy in Wairoa, and this statistic reflects what we found. Generally in New Zealand, adults volunteer at a rate of about 14%. But in Wairoa, the rate is 50% higher. And when you go and talk with people, sitting behind that number are members of the community who are working together to support each other, to share their time, share their kai, create connections. And that's the key to resilience, is creating those connections. So those statistics help us both learn about a community and challenge our preconceptions. I want to take that a little bit further. We also worked with the local iwi, Ngāti Pahuera. And this is a map of the area that shows their properties. So these are 4 farms that they own. And this part of the research is really important because it combines 2 things: working with people and also using science and models to help them and to support them. We have a farm systems modeling team, and they've developed a model that uses land management units to talk about how you might manage each one of these specific farms, but then combine them into a whole that works better together. So they took their model to Wairoa, and they sat down with the iwi, and they ran through it. And they were able to show the iwi that actually they were doing a really good job of managing their properties. But the other thing they were able to do is help the iwi think about, when we go to acquire new properties, what should they be? What are the best properties to add to our portfolio? So this is a great example of both working with a local community, but also bringing in some new knowledge, bringing in some science, and helping them solve problems. You also see some of those themes coming through. Ngāti Pahuera is creating its own future by looking at its potential options. And also, you see the complexity here. How do we manage these different farms? And then you see the scale operating also. You've got individual farms, but they're also trying to manage it at more of a regional scale. So this, to me, is a great example of the breadth of the work that we've been doing. Now, as I've said, resilience is complex, and we had to figure out how to communicate that. So one of the things we've done in this research is develop a resilience framework. Now, there's not enough time to walk you through all of it, but one of the things I want to point out is these wedges in a circle. What that does is it helps us talk about the individual resilience dimensions. Each one of the wedges represents social or cultural or economic resilience. But you can put them into a whole and get a snapshot of resilience. So this is something that we've used to track complexity. And what we've done is we've gone out into communities and we've held workshops and we've asked them, so what's good about your place? What are your challenges here? And how resilient do you feel? Now, that last question might seem a bit funny. How do you ask people how resilient they are? But actually you can, and you can get sensible answers. And it's actually really important to go and talk with them, because one of the things we've noticed is that when you're making business decisions or when you're developing policies, you are making judgments about communities. You're also working from preconceptions about communities. And it's actually really important to go out and talk with the people there, to hear their voices. And one thing that our techniques and our models and our frameworks do is allow us to kind of surface those ideas, to bring them out into the open so they become part of the kōrero. And I'll show you an example of this. So this map here has data from the New Zealand Deprivation Index. We went and we did workshops in four towns on this map. And each one of those towns, according to the Deprivation Index, scores a 5. All of them are most deprived. So when you walk into a town, it doesn't actually tell you very much about the place you're entering. All you know is it's most deprived. So these are the results after we held the community workshops. These are the 4 original towns plus 2 more places where we've done some work. And there you see the diversity. Different towns have identified different sources of strength. They've identified different weaknesses. And you can see those patterns emerging. So using this framework gives us a lot more information about the places where we've been working. they're not all uniformly deprived. They're not all a 5. And having this kind of fine-grained information is really important. So at the beginning, I mentioned that we've published a book yesterday. We've brought along a few copies. I understand they're giving some of them out. It'd be lovely if you came and talked with us about it. So I'm here. I'm happy to talk afterward. And I've also come along with my colleague Penny Payne from Ag Research. Please come and talk with us. We'd love to hear what you have to say and tell you about the work that we've been doing. I've been asked a couple of times to summarize this work, and it's really hard. I mean, you've seen the frameworks that I've put up, and you can see the differences across the town. So the best I can really do is to use that well-known whakatoki. He aha te mea nui o te ao. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Kia ora.